Flower essences and homeopathy have been weaving in and out of my life and my practice. These are very much sister medicines. They are very compatible. They can work together very nicely, but they're also very different. And if I were to say, well, I could describe homeopathy as the fastidious, proper sister. And, flower essence therapy is more like the easygoing wild child of, the energy medicines. And I think that's part of its charm, and that's part of what makes it so accessible to anyone. So it's something that the homeopath can use as a support within their own practice. It's something that the homeopathic home prescriber can also use as an add-on, and it kind of broaden the repertoire. And also just anyone can step in super easily, because it's one of those practices that it's just really forgiving. So there's this way that they fit nicely together in terms of vision and understanding of life. That's really important. But they're also compatible clinically. So the piece that is really important here is that
today's guest is the absolutely delightful Linda Nurra, who you can learn about more in episode 417 as well, where she gives us an introduction to the Bach flower remedies. Today, she has come back to give us a bit more practical information on exactly what sort of situations we can use the Bach flowers. And I have to say, this episode had a lot of relevance for me personally, because I recently opened the Centre for Homeopathic Education in Australia. We opened a branch of that over here. And it's been interesting watching our students' journeys and the challenges they've gone through. And I have to say, seeing how the Bach flowers can help students through this process is absolutely incredible, but also for us as homeopaths. And probably my favorite takeaway from this episode is how we can use Bach flowers to help our clients with homeopathic aggravations. And as you listen to Linda today, you'll really see how there is, you can use Bach flowers in every stage and area of your life. So I hope you will feel inspired by today's episode to give them a go. If you are a homeopath wanting to learn how you can more incorporate the Bach flowers into your clinic, then on the 14th of January, Linda has a CHINA approved course called Bach Flower Therapy for Homeopaths. So go and check it out. You will hear from this episode as well that she's an incredible lecturer and speaker with a beautiful, calm energy. So she's someone that's really lovely to learn from. Visit insighthomeopathy.com. You can also find Linda Nurra on Instagram and Facebook. And I hope you'll enjoy the episode, and do reach out to Linda if you have any questions at all.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout Podcast, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now our mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout, where today we get to have a return guest, the lovely Linda Nurra. Welcome back, Linda.
Thank you, Eugenie. So great to be here.
Lovely to see you too. I mean, I feel like we're besties already, because we, chatted just the other day, and I was already like spilling my guts to you about everything that's going on in my life just before. But I think that's a homeopath thing. You definitely have this energy. Do you find people say that to you, but they just want to like tell you stuff?
Yes, sometimes.
Yeah, that energy for sure. Now, Linda was on episode 417, and at the time I was saying, I don't know how we have gone through 400 episodes without a single one on the Bach flowers. And do you say Bach or Bach? I know over here we say Bach.
I say Bach, and I learned that way, and I stayed with it. But, It's kind of divided in a couple pronunciation camps.
Yeah, well, it's German, right? So it'll probably be like Bach. I wonder what they would probably say Bach or Bach. I don't know. Anyway, some people say Bach. So maybe we should just get all the different pronunciations out there in case people know, I know what Bach flowers are. Okay, this makes sense. But we had such an amazing response to your episode, and so many people were like, wow, this is great. I really want to get into that. And so I reached out and I said to Linda, can you please come back and just dive like a little bit deeper and just give us a bit more information about the Bach flowers? So what other information would you like to share with our listeners?
Yes. So, what I'd like to do today, I'm thinking of talking about this relationship of flower essence therapy and homeopathy. And we could stay with the Bach or Bach flowers, but I kind of want to open it. I want to create a little bit of spaciousness because a lot of our listeners might be using other flower essences or may be interested in other systems and collections of flower essences. So without being too sectarian, that it needs to be about the Bach flowers, I just kind of want to open up, and create some spaciousness around this.
I like that. The floor is yours. Just go for it. I'm just here for the ride. That's why I said to you, just come and talk more to us. I just want to sit and hear about it and bring our listeners along.
Fun. So the first thing that I'm just going to say, I already introduced myself last time, so I'm not going to go into that, but there's a way that flower essences and homeopathy have been weaving in and out of my life and my practice. And so the first thing that I want to say is that these are very much sister medicines. They are very compatible. They can work together very nicely, but they're also very different, And if I were to say, well, I could describe homeopathy as the fastidious proper sister, and, flower essence therapy is more like the easygoing wild child of, the energy medicines. And I think that's part of its charm, and that's part of what makes it so accessible to anyone. So it's something that the homeopath can use as a support within their own practice. It's something that the home prescriber, the homeopathic home prescriber, can also use as an add-on, and it kind of broaden the repertoire. And also just anyone can step in super easily because it's one of those practices that it's just really forgiving. It's very easy to learn flower essences, and you can't really go wrong. Like there's nothing that you can really do wrong, or there's no way that you can cause harm of any kind. So that's part of it. And I think the time of flower essences is now. And I've heard this from others too. There's this feeling of people are so ready for this, and they're wanting to look more and more into self-care. Like, what can they do that is natural, that's safe, that's gentle to care for themselves in their inner life? So part of the reason why I'm here, and also why I keep coming back to the flower essences, is I just feel we can reach so many more people. And, there's great work that's being done with homeopathy, but if we just kind of extend the breath a little bit to this other sister medicine, we can reach people. And then also through the flower essences, people might step into homeopathy, So I actually had one of my students, she's a trained homeopath, who then learned flower essence therapy. And she said to me, Linda, this is this amazing gateway medicine. She said, because a lot of people aren't ready to start homeopathy for whatever reason. And she says it's so much easier to reach them with the flower essences, and you do this very simple, short consult, and they take the essences and they're like, wait a minute, what's this all about? And then with time, they become interested in homeopathy. So there are a lot of different ways that we can think about this work. And my thought for today is that we could get really practical. Like, what are some of the examples of how anyone can use these remedies, but in particular, the people who are moving through a homeopathic process of some kind, right? How can it be helpful for the client, the home prescriber, but also for the homeopath, the homeopathy student? It's like there's this beautiful way that these remedies can support all of us who are here, and all of your listeners, it feels resonant for them. So
let's do it. That sounds amazing. And you're so right. I hadn't really thought about that, but this is probably good advice for any new homeopath starting out as well. If you're trying to build your practice, then it might be easier to reach people, with the flower essences as well. Maybe people resonate with that a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it's impossible to do any harm. Like, it's not something that you're going to cause massive aggravations from or anything like that. So it's definitely very gentle. And there's not as many. There's certainly not, 8,000 different ones that you have to correctly match. You have a certain set that you work with. So much more manageable.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So for our listeners, just for the listeners who may not have gone too far into this and really understanding, like, what are the similarities and the differences, I just want to say a couple basic things. I said, I call them sister medicines. And so I just want to kind of say why. We know that flower essence therapy in the form of Bach flower remedies came from Edward Bach, who was a homeopath. So there's this historical connection with homeopathy. And there are also philosophical connections and similarities between the two. We know that they are both vibrational medicines. We also call them energy medicines. And they are both vitalistic, which means that in both systems, we are looking at our physical body as just one aspect of a being that is much greater, that is spiritual in many ways. And so there is this vision of humans and life and animals and, all of life really, that is holistic and integrated. Body, mind, spirit, all expressions of the one. And with homeopathy and flower essence therapy, we are looking to heal the deepest part of ourselves, and we're healing from the inside out. We are looking at who is this person in front of us, right? We're not looking at a collection of parts or collection of diagnostic labels or anything like that, right? So there's this way that they fit nicely together in terms of vision and understanding of life. That's really important. But they're also compatible clinically. So the piece that is really important here is that they do not interfere with each other. Okay. So the question that people ask is, well, are Bach flower remedies or flower essences going to interfere if I'm already taking homeopathic remedies? And they really don't. There's some way in which they work on different layers, different levels. Some people have this concern. What does it mean if you're doing multiple things together? But there's a way that we can do this judiciously so that we're aware of what's happening with either of the modalities. So all that said, I kind of want to, then talk about, well, how can they help us? So we can probably start with the biggest audience here, I think, which is the enthusiasts and probably the homeopathic home prescribers. What do you think, Eugenie? Do you have a sense?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a poll like a couple of years ago in the Homeopathy Hangout Podcast Facebook group, say who is home users, who are homeopaths and students, and it was 50-50 down the middle. And then we did exactly the same poll a few months ago, and it was interesting because it was 2/3 homeopaths, 1/3 home users. And the theory was that people are starting to study to become homeopaths. So that's really cool. Hopefully the podcast has something to do with that. But yeah, no, go for it. I think whatever information you give us, Linda, will be lovely. And I'm always a big believer that there's somebody that needs to hear your message, so we're here for whatever you have to offer.
Well, I want to start with probably the home prescriber is an interesting place to start because so many people are learning about homeopathy and they are learning that they can practice acute care at home. They can support their families in the most amazing way, right? And we also know that homeopathy is very complex. And there are some limitations to what the home prescriber can do, right? Because, it's, there's such a knowledge base and so much experience that you need in order to really go deep with homeopathy, and especially to practice what we call constitutional care. That's that very deep chronic care that we all know can do amazing things. So in a sense, it's like the home prescriber is like learning. There's all this excitement and you want to go and you want to help everybody. And there's some limitations about what you can do. So with the flower essences, you are actually able to step into an area that goes beyond homeopathic acute care. You can start going into the deeper layers. And that's quite nice. It's like rounds things out for you. You can work more with all the mental and emotional layers that you may not be able to do with just, if you're self-taught in homeopathy, or maybe you've taken a couple courses. So that's one thing. I just really want to encourage everybody. If you are inspired to learn this, go and buy yourself a kit. Any kit of flower essences. Bach flower remedies are probably the most easily accessible. And, we know a lot about them. They're easy to learn. They're user friendly. So that's one place to begin. But it's one of those things that you can even just teach yourself, or you can go online and there's so much information. Just try it and play. It's like one thing that you can do. Okay.
I'm glad you've addressed the mental emotional, because so often, that child going to school for the first time, or to daycare for the first time, or seeing a scary thing on TV, or, their pets that have passed away, or these mental emotional things, they can turn into physical things, physical manifestations. So if we can use the essences to kind of like address those mental emotional concerns as they come up, then, hopefully there's fewer things down the track.
Yeah. It's, that idea of all the ups and downs of life. And it doesn't mean, we don't need a medicine for all the ups and downs of life, because there's a reason why we go through those experiences, but the essences can make the journey gentler and softer. And think about the young child. And you mentioned, what can we do to help our kids? The young child can have an experience at school that they maybe never recover from, that maybe 50 years down the line is still with them. And if we have this beautiful, gentle way to help them move through that experience, it's priceless. I can't imagine a more valuable thing that we can do to support them. So just for families, for self-care, and I think we'd make the world a better place if, we could just share with as many people as we could.
One of my goals is that, imagine you're in a birthing suite and, as your baby's born, you were getting this little kit of flower essences and some homeopathics and things like that. The ideal is to really get it at them before they get pregnant. But I find the time when people really start asking questions is once they've got their baby and there's a fever, or the child is sick, and suddenly they find, all these things that I've relied on, I suddenly can't give to this baby anymore because they're too little. And so that's really where, flower essence and homeopathy has a huge role to play, because we do have something that's safe to offer.
I love this idea about childbirth. There are all these stages in life that, they're not symptoms, they're not diseases, they're not anything to cure. However, they can be difficult. They can be challenging, and so even just as an accompaniment, even when everything is going smoothly, it can take a lot out of us, and so it's like, here we are, there's this lovely resource that we can use.
And of course, I think our listeners will know by now, but of course, these are all safe in pregnancy and, during childbirth and newborns. And, so the ideal really would be, or maybe even if you've got a friend that's pregnant, get them a little kit and a little, intro. I think you do courses as well, right, Linda? So maybe somebody can purchase one of your courses as a gift for their pregnant friend or something like that. So they can just learn how to use it. Or midwives. Imagine a world where all midwives are trained on this sort of thing and they can use that. Anyway, that's an area where I think we can make a huge difference.
From the cradle to the grave, sometimes we say, right? Even, the birth doula, the midwife, and then the death doula. This idea that we can help people kind of transition in this way is also, there's so many examples where we can really, really help. So
absolutely.
I want to talk about kind of going more into the realm of homeopathy, like the practice of homeopathy. And one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is homeopathic education. I know that you are doing more and more in this area now, taking the leadership of the branch of a homeopathy school. And I have a lot of colleagues who are, teachers and leading schools, and really asking the question of how can we support students? And how can we promote retention, both within the schools and also after students graduate for the profession. And this is one of the places where I also say there should be a kit in every student's hands. Because, I think there's something that's really exciting about going to the school, when you hear the call and you start on this journey. I mean, it's exhilarating, right? And there's this way that like everything you hear just blows your mind, and it's kind of like falling in love, right? Super exciting. And then there's this moment where you start to feel a little humbled, like it's a lot to learn. It's 200 years of philosophy and methodology. You learn that there are 9,000 and plus remedies. And how many do you need to learn? There's all these things that come up around, can I do this? Right? Am I capable? And maybe the feeling that, maybe you can't, maybe it's a lot. And so those are the moments where certainly talking about this within the schools, normalizing this process, like telling students, yes, we can move through this. This happens to all of us, is probably the most important thing. But also the remedies, the essences. There's a beautiful remedy larch for when we start to feel like we can't do it. We feel insecure, our confidence starts to falter. There's another experience that I've heard from a lot of the students I've worked with is this feeling of overwhelm that can happen, right? It's so much work. It's so many remedies. There's a beautiful remedy called elm for the overwhelm, right? Which is so easy to remember. I love that one for that reason.
Elm for the overwhelm. I love that. Anything to help you remember. That's great. I love that we're talking about this because, like you said, I've just started the Australian branch of the Centre for Homeopathic Education, and I've never been a principal of a school before. And exactly all those things that you're mentioning, the students are so excited, but then the overwhelm has started to kick in because there's a lot of work. There is assignments. They're being, one of the first ones was a self-reflection assignment, which was quite a lot for a lot of them because they had to go and dig up some old wounds and kind of like, how did they deal with that? What did they learn from that? So I don't know if you've got a remedy for that as well, because they've just handed in their assignments.
Yeah, I think homeopathy school and this process like brings up all our stuff.
It does. That's why it's like a personal development course on steroids. I don't think people know that when they sign up to become a homeopath. So any remedies that you have for any of that, but also a lot of them are adult learners, right? They might not have learned since they were at school. And so there's a lot of these insecurities that was coming up. And that's something that I thought was, it was really interesting seeing this come up for everyone and holding space for them. So yeah, I'm here for all this stuff. Give me more of this, please, because this feels really practical to me.
Insecurities. I haven't done this in years. Can I really do this? Or maybe this feeling of, oh, other people are doing it just fine. Why can't I?
I've heard a lot of that.
That's large. One of the things that I've also seen that comes up is perfectionism. I have to make it perfect. It takes me a long time. I can't write my essays because they have to be perfect, right? Rock water for those who hold themselves to such a high standard, right? And our message to them is just, it's okay. Just do your best, right? But that's the other thing that comes up. Or let's see, there's, another one that I used to hear is, oh, I just have this mental block. I just can't do it right now. And then maybe they get going and they're fine, but it's like, oh, I can't get started. I'm procrastinating. That's the remedy hornbeam. So do you see, we can probably name every moment, every passage in the life of the student, and there's a remedy for that.
Well, I have one more. Can I give you one more example? I've had a couple of them because most of them are mums, and a couple of them have had this feeling come up of guilt around taking time for themselves to go and study. So they feel that they need to go do the dishes or whatever else, and they actually feel guilty to go and say to the family, no, I need this hour, at this particular day, this is my hour. Like, do you have something for that?
Yes. No, I'm focusing on the Bach flower remedies because they're the easiest.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. Like, do you have a Bach flower for something like that? Maybe it's more to do with maybe boundaries or like low self-esteem or like asking what it is that, being afraid to ask for what it is that you need.
I'm gonna give you two. One is the remedy pine. Pine is for guilt, for self-blame and for self-reproach, right? So it's like, I feel guilty that I'm taking time to do this other thing, right? Or maybe the story, yes, I'm neglecting my children, my partner, or whatever it might be. And there's another one that you intuited when you said the word boundaries, because a lot of us who are in the caring professions and are called to homeopathy are big givers. We're caretakers. And often we take care of other people before we even take care of ourselves. And there's this remedy called century for the givers who give so much that sometimes there's nothing left for them, right? And so the remedy is about this balance between giving and receiving, being able to receive and also to set a boundary with others and say, no, not right now. This is for me. Very important. And century and pine often go together, as you can imagine, right? So yeah, that's a really big one. And also this idea, we're going through homeopathy school. We've taken on this really big thing. It's fantastic. And the rest of our life is still happening. It's not waiting for us, So it's like, it's a lot to hold. And so the more we can build capacity, right? And it's like the more we can build our resource state, our inner resources, and also build our toolkit for what we do when these moments happen, the more successful we're going to be as students, but also it's preparation for practice.
Yeah.
It's a rehearse all of that so that when we are finally out there hanging up the shingle, and then we're really, in a sense, on our own, we know what we need to do to care for ourselves.
I love that. I have one more question for you. So we have our study candles. We have our study candles back here. With any of our live tutorials, what I do is I light a candle and we take some deep breaths together and kind of just ground everybody so that they can get in the right headspace to start their studies. Because some of them have just dropped the kids off to school or they just picked them up depending on the time zone and, all these other things to do. So we're trying to just like ground them and get them into that headspace before they start. Have you got a particular essence that they can take to kind of like ground them or help them focus or like something that they can take before like a live tutorial where they're going to be taking in a lot of information? They need to wash away the stuff of the day, but then focus.
Ooh, lovely. Lovely. Okay. There are a few that. Okay.
This is the put Linda on the spot day.
I would say the first thing is it's not the easy answer, but so many things can take us out of presence, right? And essentially, whenever we are kind of hijacked by the emotional brain, that takes us out of being present to what is in the moment, right? So anything that can work at that level of the emotions can help us to become present. So you asked this question about how to bring students into presence when we're coming to, right? One of the remedies is white chestnut. So white chestnut is for when there's a lot of noise in the mind, a lot of thoughts, right? So maybe we're carrying the day with us and the thoughts are going round and round. And then we come together in the classroom and it's hard to just quiet the mind and set everything aside. So that's one of the remedies. And, not surprisingly, that's a remedy that's used in a lot of the sleep formulas, So that's like when, the monkey mind is going. So that's one. And probably, gosh, it would be interesting, Eugenie, to ask students what's happening for them in that transition from real life into the classroom and what's on their mind. Maybe it is worries for the family. Are they going to feed themselves? Maybe it's something else, whatever they may be carrying with them. What's great is that the remedies can be really specific. Like they can really help us in a very specific way, if we need them to. So
So, quick question about dosing. And I realize with that one, I put you on the spot because actually it's probably similar to homeopathy in that, there are some specific Bach flowers for a specific thing, but also it depends why that thing has happened. You kind of need to go just behind. So it's not always just a quick fix.
I want to give a second answer because there's a remedy walnut. And walnut is when you're disturbed by outside influences. And so it could be interesting to take the remedy walnut, and it's kind of like water rolling off a duck's back, like letting other things go so you can just be right here. That's the other thought that came to me. But I mean, there are a lot of other.
I like that because the walnut represents a brain, right? It looks like the two lobes of a brain. So maybe that might help too. But how would you dose that? So like practically, yeah, is it okay to talk about that now? Because I'm just thinking like practically if you think, oh, I'm feeling I need something to help me ground before I go into this lecture, like how would you dose that?
There are a few different ways to dose. Actually, there are many ways to dose. Now, the easiest thing to remember is you're just taking some amount of the remedy. Okay? This is the simplest thing. So you can't go wrong with this. There are specific tips for how you can do it. But the easiest is you take your bottle and you put a couple drops on the tongue. That's it. And you take, what I recommend is you take a deep, relaxing, mindful breath. Now, this is the part of the literature, this piece about taking the deep breath, but we know a lot about the power of the breath. There's so many studies, and the ancient spiritual traditions told us a lot about the breath. And so when we take the deep breath, we are allowing the remedy to sort of soothe the nervous system and bring us into presence. So just a few drops on the tongue. Now, another way to do it is you can apply the remedy topically. So what you could do is you could take a couple drops and you put them on your hand and just rub them wherever you feel. Could be on the pulse points, could be on the chakras or any areas of the body where you're feeling tension. That's also a great way.
I'm just thinking like before public speaking, I wonder if it's worth like putting some on the throat or.
Absolutely. I've done it many times, right? And the other thing that you can do, is you can take a few drops from the bottle, but you can also put a few drops into a glass of water, and then you sip from the glass as often as needed until you feel better. So also the timing isn't so much a concern. In homeopathy, we talk about the minimum dose. And we give the remedy, we kind of allow the vital force to respond, and there's a certain theory about what's happening when we do that in homeopathy. With flower essences, you can take them as often as you need them. You just notice how you're feeling, you breathe with the remedy, and then, you notice how you're feeling better over time, and you can take it less and less often. There's also a third way to dose the remedies, which is where you prepare yourself a little blend in like an amber dropper bottle, or this is a really pretty blue spray bottle that I'm holding. But you can also create your blends, and there are instructions all over the internet. I don't know that we need to go into the details, but essentially you're putting water in a little dropper bottle. You can add a little bit of brandy or alcohol, and then you add the essences that you feel you need at that time. And so the other difference with homeopathy is we're not just taking one remedy at a time, we can blend multiple remedies, right? So if, for example, I'm feeling guilt and then I'm having this thing with boundaries, like we mentioned earlier, I can take pine and century together, right? Or I could take, if I'm nervous, right? Let's say, here's another one. Your first time taking a case in clinic, that's a big one.
Yes, that's a big one.
So here's my tip. This is hot tip for this. And anytime you're kind of nervous from performance anxiety, okay, great remedies: larch for self-confidence, mimulus for nerves. That anticipatory anxiety, a little bit of fearfulness, fear of public speaking, mimulus is a great remedy. And if it gets so intense that you're like frozen, almost paralyzed, because you're like panicky, then the remedy is rock rose. So students, before your first case, you can get those remedies, and then you take them before you hop on and you add them to your glass of water and you sip on the water while you're taking the case.
I
So,
love practical advice like that. It's great. It's great. Thank you.
this is actually a practice that I have been doing for years as a homeopath. And I did it a lot more often when I first started on my own. So before taking a case, anyone, even the experienced homeopath, okay, I think this is really valuable because we always talk about being the unprejudiced observer, right? And that means a lot of different things nowadays. There's this depth. Hahnemann had one idea about what that meant. And I think we've sort of deepened it now after, Freud and psychology and everything we've learned today. But there's this question of how can we be fully present to another human being? How can we take all that noise that may be happening in our outside life and set it aside for a moment, okay, or allow it to wash away so that we can be fully there for another human being without interference? And, this is a tall order because we're humans sometimes, Sometimes something happens where there's like a crisis right before we hop on a call with our client. And I don't know if it's happened to you, Eugenie, but I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that happened today before talking to you. Luckily, I could talk to you about it.
it can be, we do our best, right? We want to accept that this happens. But I've had instances where I felt something happened and I felt like I couldn't be fully there for that client and the client deserved my presence. And so what I've said it, give me 5-10 minutes. I will be with you. And I sit with myself and I tune in. I see what is happening. I take the essences that I need in that moment so that I can come back to presence and then be fully there. Sometimes, I used to do this every time I took a case. I would take a few minutes and not only scan myself for like my own stuff about, maybe life or things happening, but also kind of see, do I have any judgments arising about this case? Do I have any judgments about, maybe I feel insecure because I'm afraid I didn't get the remedy, or, oh, last time the client wasn't doing so well. I wonder how it's going to be this time. Or maybe the client is feeling upset for whatever reason. And whatever it might be, check in with that as well. What's the remedy that can help me move through that and let it go? So for me, it's like a spiritual practice. It's like a practice in presence. Just very powerful. I think for homeopaths, for any practitioner, it's also part of what keeps us in the process. Like it makes this work more sustainable if we have these kinds of resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important as students to already be aware of these things and have these support measures in place that you can use to help yourself so that you can transition into practice much easier. And you've just made me realize I really need to be using these in my life more. And they are so gentle. And I mean, do you ever get any proving symptoms from a Bach flower remedy? So if you have been taking it too much, can you then produce the symptoms that the essence is known to cure, like how we do in homeopathy?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And that's really interesting and unique. They have these similarities as vibrational medicines, but they work differently. So the remedies, well, the first thing is we can't actually, even if we wanted to do a proving, we couldn't do a proving in a traditional homeopathic way. Like it's not possible, right? So that's the first thing. And we cannot create proving symptoms. That's why it's completely fine to take the wrong remedy. I put that in quotes. It's completely fine to take a remedy as often as you need it. And we're not going to see, though, any kinds of symptoms arise from that. That would, anything similar to a homeopathic proving.
I don't think I knew that. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
So cool. But also, have you found that when somebody doesn't need an essence, they just forget to take it anyway? So you can, I've certainly found that. Like if I need it, I'll take it. But then you get to a point where you actually just don't need it anymore. So say if you, especially for anxiety, you might give a, essence to somebody for anxiety and they might be taking it like every single day. And then as it's starting to help them, they just forget to take it because they don't actually need it anymore.
Right. Right. And that's your sign. Maybe you need to revise that blend. Maybe they're done or maybe they need something a little bit different. Yeah.
Because often the reason that you remember to take that essence or the remedy is because you have that feeling in you and that reminds you to take it. But once that feeling or that disharmony starts being healed and going away, you don't have that trigger to remind you that you need to take it. So,
right. What I like about this, what you're bringing up is reminding me of this other point that with these remedies, we sort of self-regulate. Like, we can take them intuitively. And so it's this practice of observing ourselves. It's like this practice in self-reflection, we sort of develop an emotional intelligence, maybe, or we deepen the emotional intelligence. And imagine with little kids, I've seen this with young children. I mean, imagine the 2 and 3-year-old who is used to taking flower essences, and I have seen this happen, and they say, they go to their mother and they say, Mama, give me some drippy drops, or give me some magic drops, and it's so cute how, different, it's great when you have the special names for the special drops. But what's happening there is that imagine the 3-year-old child that is becoming aware of their emotional life and can witness themselves or can witness something that allows them to say, Mama, can you give me my magic drops?
That's the part that makes me want to cry because I am just so grateful that my kids have been raised with natural medicine because those two are so in tune with their bodies. And I feel if you have that gift, then when it comes to, somebody forcing you into doing something to or with your body that you don't want to do, it's so much bigger than just raising our children with natural medicine. It's giving them back that autonomy. It's getting them back that beautiful relationship with your own body and how your body is a temple and you need to look after it and listen to it. And it will talk to you and give you symptoms, and that's the language that it uses. And if you are tuned into listening to that, I think it just transcends so much more than just being about natural health. It's much more than that. Much, much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that, Eugenie. Yes, it just becomes a life wisdom. It's like we acquire this wisdom about our inner life and about healing and being in the world. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, by being in tune with your body, you notice a shift when you're with people that you shouldn't be with, or in a relationship that you shouldn't be with, or if you're eating certain foods that you shouldn't, because you are in tune with what it feels like to be in your body. And when things are out of whack, I don't know, I just think when you haven't used a lot of suppressive medications and you get to use natural things to move through what it is that you're going through mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You're moving through that with natural medicine rather than suppressing that. But I just think maybe that's something that we don't talk about enough, that it's not just about the natural medicine, it's about learning how to be in our bodies and listen to our bodies and the messages that it will give us. So.
Yes. Eugenia, it's making me think that there's also a really important piece here about self-care and self-reliance. And where so many people are moving away from a hierarchical model of medicine and healing, where someone above us knows what's best for us, and we are, in a sense, sort of helpless and receiving whatever is happening. And so the reason that I love homeopathy and flower essences is because we become our own authority in some ways, in many ways. And especially with flower essences that are so easy to, practice for just anybody, there's a sense of empowerment that comes from this. Like, I can do something. There's something within my control. I think the hardest part about suffering, human suffering, is, that feeling of like, I have no control over this. I don't know what to do, and I have to find somebody or someone who can help me. But as soon as I have resources for myself, like, already there's something so deeply soothing in that. And I think it's really important. This is one of the reasons why, even within the homeopathic therapeutic context, so the homeopath working with the client, there is space for the flower essences. Because, again, life happens. And as homeopaths, we are not always able to give a remedy for every single bump that happens along the way, And so when we can help our clients with the essences, we're creating this sense of trust and also giving them a tool where they can, there's this more of this feeling of being in control of what's happening with you, right? There's something that you can do. You don't always have to watch and wait, So this is another thing for the homeopath to use the flower essences judiciously to fill the gaps when needed. Sometimes it's because of the life events that happen. And, some people have a lot going on and they need a little bit more. They like to take something every day, or they like to have something that they can turn to when they need it. Sometimes the big crises happen. Of course, we can use homeopathy for, those moments as well. And another area where I have found these really helpful is aggravations. Managing aggravations and helping the client through the aggravation.
Oh, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because actually sometimes it can be hard to antidote a remedy that you've given that's causing a big aggravation. And not that you necessarily want to antidote it, because the reason it's been a big aggravation has probably been something that's brought up. But this is a conversation that we have often. So I'm excited about this. Tell me all about it.
Yeah. This can be so helpful. And I agree with you, right? We don't always want to intervene. We may not be able to intervene. It's, sometimes it's not advisable to give another homeopathic remedy or try to antidote if that's even possible. So we can use these remedies, I would say, in any kind of aggravation, right? We talk in homeopathy, we distinguish, we're kind of very literate on aggravations, similar, dissimilar, or, is it a natural progression of the disease? Whatever the kind of aggravation, when the client reaches out to us, right, often they're confused. If they're upset enough to reach out, they're either confused about what's happening, or they might feel anxious, right? They want reassurance, which we can certainly give them and sometimes people get panicky. So, when it's not enough to just say, well, it's okay, this is part of the process, that might be the place to use the flower essences. So one of them I already mentioned earlier, rock rose. Rock rose is a remedy for panic, or when somebody begins to feel very afraid about their health. It's one of the remedies in Rescue Remedy. We can also give Rescue Remedy, but I think in a lot of these situations, just giving the single remedy rock rose can touch even more deeply. It's just for that very intense, sometimes even life or death fear that people go through. Another remedy for fear of illness or that kind of maybe a more lower grade anxiety would be mimulus. We talked about mimulus already for the performance anxiety. Those are just some options, some of the options. Or when a client starts to feel disappointed and they say, gosh, I thought I was doing better and now I'm not doing so well and I'm so discouraged. There's a remedy, gentian, for that when we get discouraged about the setbacks, or a diagnostic shock. We work with our client goes to the doctor and has some really bad news, and maybe we want to stay the course. We don't want to change the remedy. We don't want to interrupt what's happening. Star of Bethlehem, okay, can really soothe the shock from the diagnosis, okay? So a lot of different ways to do this. And in my experience, the client who we can support in this way is a client who trusts us more. Like they can feel safe that when they need us, we have options. Okay. And it's not just, no, you need to wait, And I'm saying this because I made that mistake really early on in my practice. Okay. So I trained as a classical homeopath and I had these very purist ideas about how I was going to practice homeopathy. And we weren't going to muck around and we weren't going to interfere and we weren't going to suppress or do anything that could interfere with the purity of, you know, the one and
You
true.
see me like nodding my head and putting up my hand. Exactly the same here. Exactly the same. That's the tricky thing when you're a student. And I see that with like other students and like you think you know everything because this is what your teachers told you, your lecturers told you. And this is like the dogma that you follow. But then you go out in clinical practice and that's actually not how it works because your client will not come back if they have a huge aggravation and you haven't supported them through that and you've told them that. And also because I see these types of posts in homeopathy Facebook groups all the time where people are like, I've had a massive aggravation and my homeopath told me I'm not allowed to do anything. Like, you can't do that.
Yes, I can't tell you the clients I lost early on for that. And, I reflected on it for so many years after that. It's our job, first and foremost, is to support the client. It's not to be faithful to the theory. We certainly want to respect the integrity of the process. There is a reason why we learn these homeopathic principles, and there are ways that we can support the clients while maintaining the integrity of the classical homeopathic process. And that's why I would say, it is possible to interfere, depending on what other modalities we're using. Yes, there may be interference effects with homeopathy, but in my experience with the flower essences, we can just rest easy that this just generally isn't the case. I just haven't seen it, And again, it's that building trust. The client will feel like you're really there for them. So, yeah.
I felt this has been an incredibly amazing golden nugget that you've given us because the topic of aggravations comes up often and there's talks about, whether we can antidote it and how easy or hard it is to antidote it. And actually in my clinical experience, I found it can actually be quite hard to stop an aggravation. It's like, the ball's on the roll, you kind of have to work through it. So I feel that you sharing this golden nugget with us is really helpful. And I hope that lots of homeopaths will jump on board and start using Bach flowers to help their clients through aggravations. And then also, like you say, it builds trust with your client, which in the end is good for the longevity of your clinical practice because that client's going to stay with you. And there's statistics out there of, it costs, I don't know, X amount more to gain a new customer client than it is to retain your existing one. And so if you can use something as simple, just from a business perspective, something simple as this to retain your existing customers or clients, rather than going and trying to get new ones, then it makes sense from a business perspective as well as just from empathy, just being, supportive. And yeah, I think that's amazing. Thank you for that beautiful golden nugget.
I want to add, there's one piece that's really interesting here. When people are in pain or they're in discomfort, when they become panicky, that amplifies their perception of pain.
Yes.
We have studies on this, right? So what will happen when you give an essence that can bring the panic and the fear down, you are actually lowering the pain threshold and they are able to tolerate their symptoms. So there is even there's a greater wisdom in helping the clients with their emotional state because you may notice that the physical symptoms get better.
That's the insert mind blow emoji here. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I meant to say raising the pain threshold. Anyway, but you get the point.
We get what you mean. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, because if your whole nervous system is in that, fight or flight response of being panicky, then you're going to perceive whatever it is that you're going through as much more traumatic than potentially what it, physically is. So that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Holy moly, you've been dropping value bombs left, right, and center here today. Value bomb. Value bomb. Thank you so much, Linda. Is there a final message that you want to leave us with? I think that we need to get you back on every now and again to just kind of remind us, hey, Bach flowers are here to help you. Just come and talk to us a bit more. But in the meantime, is there a final message that you want to leave us with? And can you just give us all your social media and your website and your courses and everything else? Just run that through here again. We'll pop it in the show notes too, but just so people know what you have.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Well, I'll say very briefly, my website is insighthomeopathy.com. And there is a course on Bach flower therapy for homeopaths that's coming up in January. I would love to have anyone who's interested join. It's about bringing Bach flower remedies into your clinical practice to do a lot of the things that we talked about this evening and a lot more. And let's see, you can just find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Linda Nurra, and I look forward to meeting meeting anyone who's interested in this work and inspiring you if you feel called to it. The final message is, I believe that these essences help us to drop into who we are more deeply and fully and authentically. And there's nothing more precious and amazing in life in my mind. So I just really want to invite everyone to explore if this feels like a resonant path.
And you can also now buy T-shirts on Linda's website that says these essences help you drop more into who you are. I'm just kidding, but you're going to have to make T-shirts now that say that.
Jeannie, I'm going to have to give you a cut on that one.
But it only comes in one color, and that's teal. So, Faye, we were just talking about how we love the color teal beforehand. Linda, it was so lovely to have you on. Thank you for dropping your value bombs today. I really appreciate it and look forward to us chatting again soon. And you have absolutely inspired me to bring these into my clinical practice for sure. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeannie. Take care.